Following the Lucy Letby story, the Labour government has said that it would rapidly introduce measures to stop NHS managers who've been found guilty of wrongdoing from continuing in their career path in the NHS. It would stop people with dodgy backgrounds from being employed in the NHS in a managerial position. I think the Labour Party is quite right to target the area for improvement in the NHS in the bureaucratic side. It's the bureaucracy of the NHS which is badly in need of an overhaul and a clear out and, frankly, pruning. And then maybe it will work. I think, although there's a lot to be said for simply dumping the current bureaucratic system and putting in another one, that would take too much time. We need to try to make the bureaucratic system that we've got work. Now, the problem is that it's 2 or 3 different bureaucratic systems all trying to interface. And that means we need the people in the bureaucracy, in the bureaucratic side of the NHS, to start doing the work and stop running around the place pontificating. They need to actually do some work. Just like the people on the ground, just like the doctors and the nurses are actually doing work, the NHS bureaucrats need to follow suit. And if they can't follow suit, they need to leave. And I think various things should follow from that. First of all, doctors and nurses should be afforded proper parking spaces so they don't have to park miles away from the hospitals and then walk in. It shouldn't be a situation where you are paying to work in the NHS. You should be paid for the work you do in the NHS, and you should be paid in a proper way, so that if you are working as a nurse, you should get parking permits. It's simply absurd to deny those and to make life difficult. Life is not made difficult for the bureaucrats. They get their parking spaces. These huge managers who do, frankly, very little to justify the enormous pay that they are given. They are there to take responsibility. It's time for them to assume that responsibility and to do it properly. In the same way, whistleblowers need to be given significantly more protection. The whistleblowers that I have spoken to from the NHS, I'm thinking of one in particular, who called out racism and bad practice. He was pilloried and treated appallingly. His life has been ruined by this NHS interaction. And the entire system, the legal system, the social system that we've got, seems to have pinned him down and fractured his progress. And one of the key phrases is a contract is not contractual, which again is nonsensical. If something is written down, that is contractual. And the NHS, because of its power, cannot get round that, or shouldn't be able to get round that. And certainly people going into court and testifying, senior administrators testifying and lying in court, getting away with it simply because the whistleblower didn't have the money to get legal advice or to get legal representation. This is just wrong. This is just wrong. And we need to make sure whistleblowers are given proper protection. So maybe he should be thinking very seriously about bringing his case back to court, but possibly once the Labour Party is in power, and he should be talking perhaps to Labour opposition spokespeople to try and get their advice. I know he's talking to his MP, but his MP, who I think is Labour, should now be directing him towards those people who are planning the whistleblower protections, so that his case becomes a target case, a case worthy of consideration. And the most important thing from the Letby story is the care of the victims. There are questions about the process of the Letby trial, and I think those are worth hearing. And there are questions about the evidence that was used. Those are worth hearing as well. We must use every aspect of the law to find justice, but at the same time, our priority must be to care for the victims, because if they are not victims of Letby, they are victims of another part of the system. And we must recognise the system has gone wrong. Who we pin that blame on is another issue. And I think too often we have focused on the blame game rather than supporting the victims of crime and irresponsible behaviour. Whether, in the end, if a child has been killed, it doesn't matter whether this was a criminal act or whether this was an act of stupidity. A child's life has been lost, and the state must do everything it can to repair that damage, or at least to offer some sort of care and support to the victim's family. And I think that is missing from our approach to these issues. If the Labour Party can deal with that, and particularly if the Labour Party, as it is now being led by a senior legal mind, then maybe it can think more clearly about the need to not so much reform our legal system, but focus our legal system on the victims as much as the criminals.